The glass walls of the conference room felt like a cage. 30 pairs of eyes stared at me in silence. Nobody dared to make a sound. Julian Mercer stood at the head of the table, his arms crossed over his chest, a smug grin plastered across his face. He looked like he had just won a lottery, enjoying the silence. "You are 57, slow and utterly worthless," Julian said, his voice loud enough to echo. The words hung in the air, cold and sharp. I felt my breath catch. 20 years. I had given 20 years of early mornings, late nights, and weekends sacrificed for this company. I had built the entire foundation of this firm from nothing, and now this was how it was ending, right in front of the colleagues I had trained. "Your title as Senior Systems Architect is officially revoked," Julian continued, clicking a black remote control. The screen behind him lit up with my profile. He drew a big red cross through my name. "The Sentinel system you have been maintaining will be dismantled and rebuilt by a new team that understands modern infrastructure." Sentinel was my creation. It was the backbone of every transaction our firm processed. The platform handled $43 million in daily transactions, and it had run without a single major crash for 2 decades. Julian called it maintaining, as if I were just a janitor, rather than the engineer who wrote every line of code. I am Evelyn Vance, or at least, I was until that Thursday afternoon. For 20 years, I had worked at Ridgefield Capital Group, a financial firm that had grown from a tiny startup. I was the architect who wrote Sentinel from scratch. None of that mattered anymore. Julian had joined us 8 months ago as the new Chief Technology Officer. He was young, loud, and full of business school buzzwords. He loved to talk about disruption. What he actually wanted was to get rid of the old guard and put his name on everything. "Does anyone have any questions?" Julian asked. His eyes locked on mine. I did not look away. My hands were shaking under the table, but my face was like stone. No one said a word. Several people suddenly found their laptops very interesting. Clara from accounting stared at her cup. Colin, a junior developer I had mentored for the last 3 years, kept his eyes glued to the floor. "Meeting adjourned," Julian said. "Evelyn, please clear out your office by 5:30. Security will show you to the door." The walk back to my office felt like a funeral. People cleared the hallways as I approached. Some whispered, while others suddenly looked busy on phone calls. I had been here longer than most of them, and now I was treated like a ghost. My office was a small room on the 3rd floor, without windows. I never cared about the view, only about the systems. The walls were covered with diagrams and sticky notes containing code. 20 years of my life fit in this small room. I sat down at my desk and looked at the dual monitors. The thing about building something complex is that you do not just write it and walk away. You look after it, you know its small details. Sentinel was not just a collection of files. It was alive, and I knew how it breathed. I also knew something Julian did not. Ridgefield Capital Group did not own Sentinel. Not completely. When I built the core architecture 20 years ago, I was hired as an independent contractor, not an employee. The original agreement from 2003 clearly stated that I kept all intellectual property rights to the core system, while the company received an exclusive license to run it. When they hired me full-time 2 years later, that original contract was never replaced. It was simply filed away. Nobody had checked the paperwork because I was loyal. But my loyalty ended today. My phone vibrated on the desk. It was a message from Charles, my husband of 33 years. He asked how the presentation went. I had told him that morning I was showing a security update, not wanting to worry him about the performance review. I did not want to explain the humiliation over text. I told him I would call him later. Then another message arrived, this time from my daughter Grace. She wanted to know if I could watch the kids this Saturday because her husband Justin had gotten tickets to a concert. Normal life was continuing outside, completely unaware that my world had just been torn apart. I did not reply. Instead, I opened my personal email and scrolled to a message I had received 3 weeks ago from Sean Barrett, the Vice President of Technology at Apex Analytics. Apex was our biggest competitor, the firm that had been trying to win over our clients for years. Sean had reached out asking if I would be open to a consulting role, stating that they were building their own platform. I had deleted the message back then because of loyalty. But I still remembered his email address. My hands did not shake as I typed my reply. I told him I was now available to discuss opportunities and asked if he could meet this afternoon. I hit send at 2:47 in the afternoon. The reply came 4 minutes later. Sean said he could meet me at the local coffee shop on Ashworth Street in 30 minutes. I grabbed my bag, walked past the empty boxes, and walked out. The local coffee shop on Ashworth Street was filled with exposed brick and modern lighting. It was far enough from the office that I would not run into anyone from Ridgefield Capital Group. I spotted Sean Barrett immediately. He was in his mid-40s, wearing an expensive suit, looking like the kind of executive who had his shoes polished daily. He stood up when I approached the corner booth. "Miss Vance, thank you for meeting me on such short notice. Call me Evelyn," I said, sliding into the booth across from him. "I should thank you. Your timing is quite remarkable." He smiled, but his eyes remained sharp and calculating. "I will be direct," he said, leaning forward. "We have been trying to compete with Ridgefield Processing's speed and accuracy for 3 years. We cannot. Our system crashes twice a month, and we have lost 4 major clients because of reliability issues. We know Sentinel is the difference, and we know you built it." "You have done your homework," I said. "We are prepared to offer you a substantial consulting contract," Sean continued. 6 months, your own team, and complete control. We want you to build us something better than Sentinel." I took a sip of the bitter black coffee. "I can do better than that," I said, looking him in the eye. "I can sell you Sentinel itself." Sean's expression did not change, but I saw his fingers tighten around his cup. "Ridgefield would never sell their core infrastructure," he said. "They do not own it," I replied. "I do." Now I had his complete attention. I pulled out my phone and opened the scanned copy of my original contract from 20 years ago. I had retrieved it from my home files last night when I began to suspect Julian was planning to push me out. I slid the phone across the table. Sean read the legal terms in silence. The background noise of the coffee shop seemed to fade as I watched his face. He realized the value of the document. "This is legitimate," he murmured. "I have already spoken to my attorney." I lied. "The intellectual property for the core architecture belongs to me. Ridgefield has an exclusive license, but that license can be terminated immediately if they commit a material breach of our employment agreement. Humiliating me in front of 30 employees and terminating my job without cause constitutes a clear breach." Sean leaned back, his mind working quickly, running the numbers and calculating the risks. I let him think. I had learned patience from 20 years of writing code and searching for errors at 3 in the morning. Finally, he looked at me. "What is your price?" $2,400,000, I said. "That includes full transfer of the intellectual property rights, complete documentation, the system blueprints, and 90 days of transition support." "That is a significant sum," Sean said. "Ridgefield processes $43 million daily through Sentinel," I replied. "If the system goes dark, they will lose more than that in a few hours, not to mention the regulatory fines. $2,400,000 is a bargain, and we both know it." Sean pulled out his phone. "I need to make a call," he said, stepping outside. Through the window, I watched him walk back and forth, talking quickly. 5 minutes later, he came back inside. "We have a deal in principle," he said. "Our legal team needs to verify the contract, and we will need a clause that prevents you from selling to anyone else." "Agreed," I said. "How fast can you deliver the files?" I checked my watch. It was 3:42 in the afternoon. "I need to extract the core code before they lock me out of the systems," I said. "Give me 2 hours. I will have everything on an encrypted drive by 6 this evening." "Evelyn," Sean said, his voice softening, "I am sorry about what happened today. I have heard Julian is a very difficult manager." "Difficult is one word for it," I said, standing up. "I will contact you by 6. The drive back to Ridgefield took 15 minutes, but my mind was moving much faster. Sentinel source code was stored on the secure corporate servers, but I still had administrative access to everything. The challenge was not copying the files. It was knowing which files actually mattered. The system had grown over 20 years, accumulating updates and quick patches. But I knew exactly which parts were mine, the core engines that made everything else function. I parked my car in my reserved spot, badge number 47, and rode the elevator back to the 3rd floor. My office was exactly as I had left it. The security guard was not scheduled to escort me out until 5:30, which gave me nearly 2 hours. I locked my door, sat down, and began the extraction. I did not rush. 20 years of engineering had taught me that speed causes mistakes, and I could not afford a single mistake. I copied the core Sentinel architecture, the algorithms, and the database structures. The files compressed into a single encrypted folder of 47 gigabytes. I copied it onto 3 separate drives. Redundancy was key. At 5:15, there was a knock on the door. It was Donald Miller, a security guard who had been here as long as I had. "Hey, Evelyn," he said quietly. "I am sorry about this." "Just doing your job, Donald," I said. I ejected the drives, slipped them into my bag, and cleared my computer history. I walked out of the building between 2 guards past the empty conference room. My car was waiting in spot 47. I sat in the driver's seat, took a deep breath, and called Sean. "It is done," I said. "I have everything." I drove home in a daze. Our modest house looked exactly the same as it had that morning, a quiet sanctuary in the suburbs. The mortgage had been paid off for 5 years, and the garden my husband Charles cared for was in full bloom. I saw Charles' truck in the driveway. He usually got home around 5:30 from his job managing projects for a local contracting firm. I walked into the kitchen and smelled the chili he was preparing on the stove. "There is my girl," Charles said, looking up with a smile, but his smile faded when he saw my face. "What happened, Evelyn?" I set my bag down carefully. "I got fired today," I said. "Julian called a meeting, told me I was slow and worthless in front of 30 people, and had security escort me out." Charles turned off the stove immediately. He came over and pulled me into a tight hug. "That arrogant fool," he whispered. 20 years you gave them." 20 years, I agreed. "There is more. I just sold Sentinel to Apex Analytics for $2,400,000. I am meeting them at 8 to sign the paperwork." Charles stared at me, blinking in disbelief. "You did what?" I explained everything. The old contract from 2003, the intellectual property rights, and the meeting with Sean. Charles listened, his expression shifting from shock to deep pride. "So, you are going to make Julian life a living nightmare by Monday morning," he said. "Yes," I replied. "Good," he said, kissing my forehead. "When do we leave?" "We leave at 7:15. We did not tell our daughters yet. This needed to be legally secure before we shared it. Apex Analytics operated out of a massive high-rise downtown, a tower of glass and steel. We took the elevator to the 18th floor, where Sean Barrett was waiting. He led us into a large conference room where 3 executives were already waiting. Sean made the introductions quickly. Helen Bradley, the chief executive officer, was in her mid-60s with sharp eyes. Beverly Thorne, the chief financial officer, was about my age with a warm smile. Lawrence Fletcher, their chief counsel, looked young and intense. Helen stood up to greet us. "Evelyn, Sean told us about your situation. First, what happened to you was completely unacceptable. Second, we are very glad you contacted us." "Thank you," I said. "Let us get down to business," Lawrence said, sliding a document across the table. "We have drafted a purchase agreement based on the terms Sean discussed. $2,400,000 for the complete transfer of intellectual property rights, with 90 days of support. We have included a strict non-compete clause and a confidentiality agreement." I read through the document carefully, with Charles reading over my shoulder. The legal terms were dense but fair. "I will need my attorney, Neil Henderson, to review this," I said. "He is expecting my call. I will send it to him now, and he can have comments by tomorrow morning." "That works for us," Helen said. In the meantime, Beverly opened a folder. "We want to understand the transition. When will Ridgefield lose access to Sentinel?" "That depends on when I file the termination notice," I said. "The contract requires 90 days, but given the material breach of my employment agreement, I can terminate it immediately." Helen leaned forward. "What happens to their operations if the platform shuts down immediately?" "Total paralysis," I said. "Sentinel processes all their transactions, manages client portfolios, handles regulatory reporting, and runs their data analytics. Without it, they cannot execute trades or access customer information. They will be in violation of 40 different financial regulations within 24 hours. And they have no backup system because Julian wanted me gone before starting development." Helen and Beverly exchanged a look. "I am thinking about something bigger," Helen said. "We do not just want the system. We want Ridgefield clients. If their platform goes dark on Monday, and we have a superior alternative ready. We can offer their clients a lifeline. A hostile takeover, Charles noted. A rescue operation, Helen corrected. I considered it. How many clients do they have? I asked. Beverly pulled up a sheet. They have 230 active clients, representing $800 million in assets. If we capture even 30% of that, it is a huge win. You will need more than 90 days of support to build a system that can absorb that load, I said. You will need 6 months minimum, and my direct supervision. Helen looked at Lawrence. Can we modify the agreement? We would need to adjust the payment, Lawrence said. $3,200,000, I said. For 6 months of full-time consultation, plus a bonus of $500,000 if we successfully migrate 30% of their clients. Charles squeezed my hand. Deal, Helen said. I want my involvement kept completely secret until Monday afternoon, I added. If Julian finds out, he will try to lock me out. Agreed, Helen said. We will use a shell company for the consultation. Your name will not be on any public files. We spent another hour discussing details before leaving. As we walked to the car, Charles looked at me. You just sold 20 years of work for over $3 million, he said. I made sure my work actually continues to matter, I replied. I spent the entire weekend locked in my home office. While the rest of the world enjoyed the spring weather, my mind was buried in code structures. I lay awake at night running through technical scenarios, making sure I had not missed any dependencies in the files I had extracted. I did not feel regret, only an intense focus. On Saturday afternoon, Neil Henderson called to confirm that the revised contract was clean and solid. I signed it digitally that evening. The agreement was finalized, and the $3,200,000 was scheduled to hit my account within 3 business days. On Monday morning, I woke up at 5 o'clock. My heart was pounding, but my hands were steady. I made a pot of coffee, sat down at my desk, and waited until exactly 9 o'clock. Then, I opened my personal email and hit send on the message I had drafted. The email was addressed directly to Julian Mercer and George Hastings, the head of our legal department. The subject was formal: termination of Sentinel license agreement. I kept the message professional and direct. I stated that based on my original development contract from 2003, I retained all intellectual property rights to the Sentinel core architecture. I explained that Julian's decision to humiliate me and terminate my employment without cause constituted a material breach of our agreement, which nullified the 90-day notice requirement. Effective immediately, I was revoking their license to run the platform. I directed all future correspondence to Neil Henderson. At 9:04 in the morning, I activated the kill switch. When I wrote the Sentinel authentication protocols 15 years ago, I built a hidden routine to handle emergency shutdowns. It was a standard failsafe that allowed a clean exit if the system's security was ever compromised. It was buried deep in the core files, and only I knew it existed. I entered the command from my personal terminal. Within seconds, Sentinel began a graceful shutdown. It would complete all active trades and save the transaction records, but once the system powered down, it would not restart without my master decryption key. The entire sequence took 40 minutes. By 10 in the morning, the platform went completely dark. My phone started ringing almost immediately. First, it was Julian's office number. I let it go to voicemail. 2 minutes later, the main corporate line called. I ignored it. Then Colin, my former junior developer, called with a text message that simply read, "Sentinel is down. We cannot restart it. Please help." I did not reply. Instead, I called Sean Barrett at Apex Analytics. "It is done," I told him. "Sentinel is offline. Our migration hotline is already open," Sean replied. "We are ready for their clients." At 10:47, Neil Henderson called. "Evelyn, I just received an extremely angry call from the legal team at Ridgefield," he said. "They are threatening an emergency injunction and a lawsuit for $50 million. "Let them try," I said. "The contract is clear. They are claiming implied ownership through your years of employment," Neil explained. "It is a weak argument, but they will throw everything they have at us." "Are you ready for a fight?" "I am completely ready," I replied. By noon, the technical failure had hit the financial news networks. The online headlines reported that Ridgefield Capital Group was experiencing a catastrophic system outage, preventing clients from accessing accounts or executing trades. In our industry, Even a few hours of downtime can destroy a firm reputation. By 2 in the afternoon, Sean sent me an update. Apex Analytics had already signed migration agreements with 45 former Ridgefield clients. By 4 in the afternoon, that number had doubled. Julian sent me a personal email at 4:30. The tone was completely different from the conference room. "Evelyn, we really need to talk," he wrote. "I apologize for my comments on Thursday. It was highly unprofessional and a mistake. But you are destroying the company. 200 people will lose their jobs if we cannot get the system back up. Please tell us how to restart it. We can discuss a new licensing fee and settle this quietly." I read the message twice. I felt no anger, only a cold clarity. I replied that he should have considered the value of experience and loyalty before he decided to throw me out. I suggested that if Ridgefield needed a financial platform, they could contact Apex Analytics, as I understood they were preparing a superior alternative. I closed my laptop and walked into the kitchen. Charles was already home, having left his job early to support me. He looked at my face and smiled. "It is done," I said. "The system is down, and their clients are leaving." Charles poured 2 glasses of water. "The real battle starts now," he said. The courtroom hearing took place the following Tuesday morning in a small, crowded room that smelled of old leather, paper, and polished wood. The atmosphere inside the chamber was incredibly tense, with representatives from major clients and several former colleagues sitting in the back rows. Ridgefield Capital Group lawyers argued that my actions had caused deliberate economic damage to their business. They claimed that the 2003 contract was outdated and that my subsequent years as a full-time employee created an implied transfer of ownership. They demanded that the court order me to restore the Sentinel platform immediately and requested $50 million in damages for lost revenue. George Hastings, their chief counsel, tried to present a narrative that because they had paid me a senior salary for years, they owned the fruits of my labor. Neil Henderson stood before the judge and calmly presented the facts of the case. He submitted the original development contract, my employment agreement, and our salary negotiation records. He pointed out that Ridgefield had never once requested a formal transfer of the intellectual property during my entire tenure at the firm. He explained that my employment agreement had no work-for-hire clause regarding the core architecture, which I had developed as an independent contractor years before. Finally, he demonstrated that Ridgefield's wrongful termination and public humiliation had violated the licensing agreement terms, justifying my immediate revocation. The judge took only 30 minutes to review the paperwork before returning to the bench. "The original agreement is completely unambiguous," the judge declared, her voice firm. "The developer retained all intellectual property rights. The subsequent employment paperwork contains no language transferring those rights. In addition, the termination of the developer employment under these circumstances constitutes a material breach, which justifies the immediate license revocation. Ridgefield request for an injunction is denied." Julian Mercer was sitting 3 rows behind his legal team, his hands clenched tightly. When the judge announced the decision, his face turned completely white, and he looked down at the table in silence. We walked out of the courthouse to find a crowd of financial reporters waiting for us. Microphones were shoved into my face, and questions were shouted from every direction. "Evelyn Vance, do you feel responsible for the collapse of Ridgefield? Are you working for their competitor now? What message does this send to older tech workers?" I stopped and looked directly at the cameras. "I spent 20 years building systems that created massive value for Ridgefield and their clients," I said. "When I was told that I was too old and too slow to matter anymore, I decided to prove otherwise. The message here is simple. Experience and expertise do not become worthless just because someone younger thinks they can do better." With that, Charles and I walked to our car, leaving the reporters behind. Within 6 weeks, Ridgefield Capital Group collapsed entirely. Paralyzed by the system outage and facing a mass exodus of clients, they sold their remaining accounts and dissolved the business. However, Apex Analytics hired 47 of their former employees who had done nothing wrong. Among them was Colin Peters, my former junior developer. Colin called me during his first week at his new job. "Evelyn, I want to apologize," he said quietly. "I should have stood up for you during that meeting. I was a coward, and I felt terrible watching you walk out. He then described the absolute chaos that erupted in the Ridgefield office on Monday morning. He told me that Julian had spent hours in the server room, screaming at the IT staff, demanding they force a reboot, only to find the core databases completely locked. George Hastings was frantically calling the lawyers, while the client service team was overwhelmed by angry phone calls. They had no backup source code, only the binary files they could not modify. Hearing him describe Julian panic made me realize how completely their arrogance had blindfolded them. "You had a family to protect, Colin," I replied. "I do not blame you. I am glad you are at Apex. They have a completely different culture, and they will value your work." Apex launched their new platform, which we named Nexus, 8 weeks after I started working with their team. It was the system I had always wanted to build, free from the old patches and updates that had cluttered Sentinel. Nexus processed its first $1 billion in transactions without a single error, establishing itself as the premier platform in the region. At the launch party in a beautiful downtown ballroom, Helen Bradley raised her glass to me in front of the entire company, praising my dedication. After the celebration, Charles and I walked along the waterfront under the stars. My phone buzzed with messages from Joy and Grace. Joy wrote that she was incredibly proud of me, and Grace joked that I was now officially cooler than either of them. I smiled and put my phone away. I had recently accepted a permanent role as Chief Architecture Officer at Apex with a salary that made my old paycheck look like pocket change. I looked at the dark water, feeling a deep sense of peace. The best revenge is not anger. It is building something that lasts and finding people who respect the value you bring to the table.